Maintenant, bienvenue à la 10e.
Calling to order, welcome to the 10th meeting of the Board of Internal Economy being held today.
Minutes of the previous meeting, everything's acceptable. Has anybody got any comments to make on that? Il n'y a pas de commentaires sur le procès verbal. Tout est bien? Parfait.
No comments on the past agenda, thank you. So anything to discuss from the prior meeting? Business arising from the previous meeting, all is clear? Very well.
The information technology systems and facility assets from the long-term vision and plan, LTVP. Now we'll have Stéphane Aubé, Chief Information Officer, and Daniel Paquette, Chief Financial Officer, present to us this morning. Before we continue, I just want to remind everyone that we do have a lot of material to cover this morning. So I just want to make sure that keep your questions concise, but very thorough, but very concise if possible. Alors, merci beaucoup. Monsieur Aubé.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Mr. Aubé. You have the floor.
Today we're here to obtain the approval for permanent funding for the operations, the maintenance, the support, and the life cycling of building connectivity assets that are transferred from PSPC to the House as part of the long-term renovations. This business case is not a new business case, sir. It's actually an update to previous approval that was made by the board. The House administration came in 2014 to this board to seek approval for connectivity assets. It came back in 2015 to seek approval for components assets. And it also came back in 2017 to seek approval for both connectivity and components assets. The board had approved $24.6 million in temporary funding at that time. In addition to the $24.6 million that we're now seeking as permanent funding, we've also updated the life cycling plan to include the assets that have been transferred since 2017 to the House of $6.7 million. The 6.7 represents basically the budgeting that is required to sustain $77 million of assets that were transferred since then from the renovations to the House. So I'd just like to give a little bit of history, sir, because some of the members of this board might not have been here at that time. So I just want to give a little bit of an history of the funding and the approvals that were previously received. En 2014, la soumission de 2014-2015.
Our submission of 2014-2015, which was presented to the Board of Internal Economy, was specifically for assets that had been transferred linked to the renovation that you see in yellow on this chart. Before 2007, the focus of long-term renovations was to get people out of the Wellington building, the Bravour building, and other buildings as well in order to ensure renovations of these buildings. Thus, we had also renovated the Justice building, also acquired spaces on Queen Street to be able to move people into those spaces. So the first submission really focused on those buildings, as well as on some BCC projects that we had to set up at that time, because our projects were increasing. We had projects to link the networks into a general campus core, and we had the Spark Street and other centers that had been created for the television center activities as well. In 2017, we returned here to you to request funds to support the renovations undertaken for the Wellington building, the 180 Wellington Street, where we have 70 MPs and 10 committee rooms. We also requested funds to support assets at Sir John A. Macdonald and at the Bravour building, Valor building. We also had two other administrative services buildings that we needed to be able to relocate administration. Today, the $6.6 million is for assets for the operations of the West Block, which is now being used for the government, as you know, as well as the Visitor Welcome Center. Those are the main requests that we are putting in now for permanent long-term funding via the Board of Internal Economy today?
We basically talk about two different categories of assets. We talk about connectivity assets, such as the cable TV network that's on the hill, the integrated security system, the networking aspects, and all the multimedia aspects. We also talk about component assets. These are assets that are linked to the facilities, but they're basically mobile within the facility, such as the furniture, the arts and artifacts, any specialized equipment such as broadcast lighting, the air conditioning that are related to technologies. So these are the particular assets that we're talking about that are under the responsibility of the house. This chart depicts the amount of assets that have been transferred as part of the renovations to the house. As you can see, there's $205 million of assets that have been transferred since 2000. And over the last 4 years, since 2016, basically these are the 77 million represents the assets that weren't part of the 2017 approval that we sought from the House, from the board. What you're seeing through this chart is a depiction of the changes that we're seeking for this through this business case is basically they're basically linked to connectivity. You see the variances. We've demonstrated the variances across the different areas of investments that basically total up to $6.6 million. From a components perspective, so as I said, the assets that are linked to the building, we're not seeking any additional funding. The reason for this is we believe with the funding that we have and also based on the current situation due to COVID, we'd like to defer any changes to that element of the funding that we've received in the past because there could be possible changes in the future. And we just want to focus on the connectivity assets because this is where we actually have an understanding of what possible changes or possible funding requirements that we will have in the future. Lastly, just a little bit of the history also. So why are we responsible for this? When the long-term renovations were launched in the early 90s and the late 90s, there was an agreement between all partners, the parliamentary partners being the Senate and the House and PSPC, that outlined the roles and responsibilities. So basically, through these projects such as the West Block, Public Works is accountable for the overall project scope, the delivery of them, but they're also responsible for the capital funding. So they provide the funding when we need to actually acquire these assets, but we are accountable for the operational funding, so being the maintenance, the support, and also the life cycle of it. This is a key element of why we're here today because we are accountable for making this happen. So it is our obligation to actually fund these assets. I just wanted to outline some of the benefits of why it's important for the House to actually receive this funding. I put these pictures there, as some of you might remember these facilities. As you see, the picture in the middle is actually an actual committee room pre-renovation. So this was a committee room in the Valor building. I have pictures also of the West Block. They're very, very similar. You can see the tables, you can see the layout of the facilities, and you can see the amount of technologies that there was in these facilities. The pictures on the right are actually the broadcasting facilities that we've had to actually provide services to the chamber and also to the committees from a television perspective. So there's many temporary facilities. These buildings weren't equipped with the equipment that we had to put forward to actually offer 21st century meetings. So hence I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of an history from a benefit perspective. You'll see also this was the cabling arrangement in these facilities, actually a picture of the center block, the security systems, how they were actually installed because we didn't have the infrastructure to support them. Basically now with these renovations, we've now allowed members to have facilities that enables them to basically interact and then have proper meeting facilities in order to have the caucuses and the committees in the chamber. And then finally, there's been a lot of investments in order to enable parliamentarians to better communicate and serve their constituents in the chamber and also from an infrastructure perspective being behind the walls. So having said that, the final recommendation is that we're here and we're recommending to this board that they move forward with the investment required and also that we move forward with the permanent funding as of 23-24 of nearly $30 million for these assets that have been transferred to the House. Mr. Speaker, I'll just open up for questions.
Very good. Est-ce que nous avons des questions? Any questions? Mr. Julian.
Thanks very much. I appreciate the detail as well that is in the documents. I guess what I want to be sure of is that this allows for the transition and allows for the acquisition of both capital and staffing required, that there won't be further funds that will be required in coming years. Because this issue, as you've mentioned, Mr. Aubé, has come back repeatedly to the boy over the last few years, and I think that certainly Canadians want to know that we're actually putting into place a plan that works for the long term and is sustainable.
Thank you, Mr. Julian, for the question. Two parts to your question. The fact that we came back every 3 years is because in 2014 we had made a commitment to the board that we would come back every 3 years, because we had recognized that there was a lot of renovations that were underway, and we weren't ready to commit to actually permanent funding because we didn't have the clear picture at that time. So this is why we came back every 3 years. But I can attest, sir, that we feel with a high level of confidence, sir, that there won't be requirements for the existing assets that we have. Having said that, as you know, in the future, there's facilities that will still need to be onboarded, sir, such as the center block. We're starting the renovations of center block. We're also starting the renovations of the Confed building that we're in planning, and we're also looking at the renovations on Sparks. These would be separate elements, sir, but certainly for all the elements that I've shown you, sir, we're not planning to come back to this board because we feel that we have a very ensured understanding of the requirements of the funding for the assets that we've transferred, sir. So we feel very confident, and I would ask my colleague, the CFO also, Dan, if you can just basically comment on that. We've done our due diligence, sir, from a financial planning perspective on all these assets.
No, I want to just comment on all that also. We've done our homework, we've done due diligence on best practice for this kind of technology, like pieces here. And that's why we were coming back every 3 years. We wanted things to be stabilized. So as Stéphane outlined in his presentation, some of these buildings we've now have had oversight and control of them in their renovated state for a couple of years or more. And we're able now to actually sit down and do those estimates with some level of assurance. Obviously, none of us have a crystal ball. So unless some really unusual event occurs or changes occurs in how Parliament wants to do business, for these buildings, for these assets, this is our best estimate of what we feel is needed long term.
But there will be, in the coming year or two on Center Block and Spark Street, potentially additional funding.
That would be in the long run, sir. We don't see that over the next 6 years, at least. We see that in a longer time period than that, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres questions? I'll just follow on Mr. Julian's, if I can, the prerogative of the chair to ask a question. Just to clarify, I think we're mixing hard assets and operations here. They're two separate issues. What we've got here is operations, correct? Salaries. That has nothing to do with purchasing new assets.
It's not only salaries, sir. It's the ability to maintain and support the assets, such as, for example, the cameras in this facility. We have to life cycle them over the years. So what we're seeking is the money to life cycle them whenever the end of life will come to them, sir. And we're seeking also for the money to support them and maintain them during their expected life cycle, sir. We had sought some original money for salaries in the previous periods. We're not seeking for any additional funding for salaries.
Very good. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Autres questions? There's two recommendations. Are we okay with those recommendations? Very good. En accordance. Alors nous allons continuer avec.
Then we will continue. I'm sorry, with item 4 here.
First, le premier présenteur, c'est Daniel.
first presentation to be given by Danielle Paquette. Presenters Danielle Paquette and Michel Laframboise. Over to you.
In assisting members in managing their complex commercial leases, we are seeking the approval to retain this team and ask for the annual cost of $273,000 to fund these 3 FTEs. So the next piece is the increased resources that are needed to respond to the coming into force of the act that amended the Canada Labour Code, the Parliamentary Employment and Staff Relation Act, and the Budget Implementation Act. That was that Bill C-65. So the Act extends the health and safety obligation under Part 2 of the Canada Labour Code to parliamentary entities. That includes the House Administration and members as employers. This program requires the development and maintenance of policies and programs to ensure that both members and House administration meet their legal obligation under the code and that members are helped to meet their obligations as employers. Resources are also needed to support the 17 different corporate prevention and compliance programs related to this initiative. So these resources will contribute to the safety and well-being of House administration and member employees, and the development of resources and tools for members, and the cost savings that could incur in relation to work injuries. So to accomplish this, we are seeking the permanent funding for the 4 FTEs at a total annual cost of $318,000.
OK. Est-ce qu'il y a des questions?
Non, j'ai la prochaine section.
The next section will be in a different language. I'm terribly sorry. Go ahead, please. That's fine. For the second submission, the Chamber Administration replaced the outdated enterprise resource planning system that was in place with a more modern and sustainable client-focused platform for financial and human resource management. The implementation of the human resource management module resulted in significant changes to business processes and organizational practices, roles, and responsibilities. This is why the central team, to support the new platform and the Human Resources Services Center, was created. This central team was established in January 2020. It manages the system's products and related support and maintenance, as well as ensuring continuous improvement and the life cycle of the system. This Human Resource Service Center, the HRSC, for its part, is a center of expertise that brings together the many human resource services and operations carried out on behalf of members and their employees, as well as employees of the House administration. The two teams, the PRO and HRSC, were created from existing resources in the administrative sectors. To date, temporary funding has been obtained through budget surpluses, but this solution is temporary and needs to be stabilized in order to secure funding for these essential positions. Permanent funding is therefore requested to support these teams in the longer term. Therefore, funding of $866,000 is requested to fund these 4 teams, the PRO and HRSC teams, 4 FTEs for PRO and 5 for HRSC. This concludes my presentation. I am available to answer questions. Thank you. Do we have any questions? Mr. Rodriguez, to begin with. Mr. Rodriguez, the floor is yours. Thank you, Chair. I would simply like to go by the $273 million request for 3 full-time employees and constituency office leases. It seems to be necessary, given that you're requesting it, but 3 full-time employees who will be working on this constituency office-based services project between elections, that seems to be a lot of money. I'm just trying to understand what the value of this service will be, how essential it is between elections. In general, there are not that many transactions, let's say changes underway in that regard. Could you tell us more? Well, it has been a number of months now since the last election, and we continue to receive calls at that team. It's a contact point to help MPs out in their constituencies. Sometimes there are requests based on changes in annual costs and so on, renovations to ensure that a owner can request renovations, and we can evaluate whether that's necessary or properly evaluated and so on, renovations of buildings. So there are fewer requests since the election, but to give you an idea, during the election itself, we had 6 people managing the transition. Now we're down to 3, and the calls for support keep coming in. Now, having people there who thoroughly understand lease services is very helpful. We do have employees able to help the administration in evaluating costs. Some of the leases are more complex. We've had to go back to claw back excess payments in some cases, and even to reimburse amounts that had not been paid that were outstanding. So requests of that nature, and the service is ongoing. So based on the type of requests we receive, our estimate is that this team must be kept up and running available to support the administration as well as MPs. Mr. Rodriguez, does that complete your question? Yes, thank you. Ms. de Bellefeuille. My question is with regard to item 4, the full-time employee equivalent for orienting MPs. Well, I can tell you that I have taken advantage of that program, being new to Parliament as of a year, and it's a very useful program indeed. Perhaps we might change its title, however, given that the person who will be joining the team is doing more than orienting MPs. I think that the undertaking is to train and support MP employees to help them acquire the level of skills needed to support MPs. Do you intend to truly do this and therefore change the name? It's not just an orientation program after all. May I answer with your permission? Thank you. Thank you, MP de Bellefeuille. Yes, the orientation program's mandate is to offer ongoing training, skills training, and we could certainly consider renaming it the description of the program. Of course, it's not merely an onboarding program. As you have said, we offer skills training, career development training, and so on. I fully agree. Could you, given that we do have people watching us on television today, could you describe some of the important ongoing skills training programs that you do offer to MP staff? Yes, I have Robin Daigle here with us today. She is actually the director of that programming, and she might be in best place to give you an in-depth description. Over to you, Robin. Yes, hello. Thank you, Michel, and thank you, MP de Bellefeuille. For programming, not merely an onboarding or integrating program to assist in integration for MPs and their staff after an election, but also transition programming is what we offer. Not merely addressed to MPs, but also to their staff. A new program has been set up since September. As you know, sometimes there's a lot of turnover in constituency offices or on the Hill, and this helps us better integrate staff. As for long-term ongoing training, we offer health and safety on the workplace, anti-harassment programming, and so on. Disclosure training, for example, as well. A lot of training is offered to staff and to MPs, and much training has been carried out, often linked to new legislation.
Thank you. Okay, so if I'm counting correctly, I think we're being asked for 12 new permanent positions here. My understanding is that in 2019, there was an approval here for 22 additional HR staff with a similar type of proposal. And at that time, Ms. Daigle was asked about this and indicated that if we ever come back to the board to either reduce or increase these resources, it would be quite a rationale associated with it. So I'm wanting to hear. I guess I'm not sure I'm seeing entirely the rationale. You know, it's obviously when there's that kind of an increase, and then a year. A bit later, we're looking for an additional increase, and it was indicated at that time that there would be quite a rationale that would need to be associated with it. I'm just trying to understand what that rationale is. I'm not sure I'm entirely hearing that here.
Madame Laframboise.
Merci. Thank you. So yes, last February there were 22 resources approved. Those resources were for overall services and human resources and not specific to occupational health and safety, which is one of the areas we are talking about today. So some of those resources were non-HR, so a few finance and some legal assistance as well, and others were deployed within the HR team to a variety of functional areas, and the remainder of them do form up the team that Ms. Daigle leads, which is the member HR services. Over the last 2 years, so since that time, occupational health and safety, as you know, the changes to the legislation are quite significant, and they are in two parts. And the first part of it was the onboarding of the House and the members to the General Labor Code provisions, which included significant increases in reporting and tracking and monitoring, training, awareness, the creation of health and safety reps, etc. So we've had COVID, of course, which definitely brought forward the importance of health and safety as well. And now we continue to move forward with the second part of the bill, which is the changes for the harassment and violence in the workplace program and having them included into the health and safety framework. That in and of itself is also quite an endeavor and requires significant modification to policies, processes, and training to ensure that we meet our obligations, we all meet our obligations as employers. So that second part of it is where the focus of these resources will be. We do have staff doing this work now on a temporary basis, but we definitely know that we're going to need those resources longer term to ensure that those obligations continue to be met. Occupational health and safety in and of itself has increased so significantly in complexity. We're not only talking about physical health anymore, we are including mental health issues. The workers' safety boards and compensation organizations now are recognizing more of the mental health, anxiety, stress issues as well. So it is quite a large basket of obligations, and we want to make sure that we are fully positioned to support the members and the House in their obligations.
Just in terms of follow-up there, obviously you mentioned COVID and dealing with it as part of the rationale there. I understand it wasn't all of it. Certainly mental health issues were mentioned, other things, and obviously coming out of COVID, I understand that that those issues probably will increase. But obviously when you mention COVID as part of the rationale, we're talking about obviously permanent positions here. You mentioned having already brought on some temporary, and I do understand why there would be need for that during the pandemic. But if COVID is a part of what we're responding to here, why would there be a requirement for those positions to become permanent? Why would they not just remain temporary positions?
So for me, I think when I refer to COVID, it's more just sort of an understanding of the importance and the complexity of occupational health and safety and where it's going as a function. You're right that there are some COVID pieces that might seem shorter term, but the anxiety and the mental health components that are resulting from COVID, we will definitely be seeing long term. The other thing is it really flagged for us the importance of being prepared, trained, set up, having the infrastructure in place. So this is not. I'm not saying that they are COVID support positions. What I'm saying is that absolutely flagged for us where we may have had some gaps and to make sure that we are able to meet any other challenges or health and safety issues that come forward.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification.
Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres questions? Seeing none, nous avons deux recommandations.
We have two recommendations. Any issues? Are you okay with everything? Perfect. We shall continue. For the next 2 points on the agenda, we don't have any presentations planned. 2 reports were sent to you in advance.
5 is the annual report on the activities and expenditures of parliamentary associations for 2019-2020. The co-chairs of the Joint Interparliamentary Council have sent a letter noting that the JIC adopted this report late last month and submitted it to the board for your information. It is a similar form as reports for previous years. If there are any questions about the report itself, the clerk of the JIC is available today, or we can invite the House co-chairs, Mr. Stanton, to appear at subsequent meetings. Est-ce qu'il y a des questions? Are there any questions? Mr. Julian?
Question, c'est très clair.
It's very clear for last year. For this year, I believe that there was no activity. Our activities were suspended on the 13th of March. So I would like to have an idea. Are there any expenses for parliamentary associations for this financial year?
Mr. Leblanc, you have an answer?
I do, Monsieur. Oui, merci.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Gillian. Yes, indeed. There was a moratorium on parliamentary associations or travel since March. As a result, activity expenses are virtually null, but with membership fees that have to be paid, members have to pay fees to belong to associations. Even then, there are still negative expenses. So there's been more income than expenditure. That being said, for the envelope for SIM, we have to pay from that envelope contributions to international organizations to belong to the NATO Parliamentary Union, the Parliamentary Union, RPF. We have to pay an annual contribution, and those payments are being made. Some 400,000 was spent for part of those contributions, and that represents about 1.4 million per year. Are you okay with that?
Richards.
Thank you. This summer, the board approved, and I think it was part of a package related to former Bill C-58 and the financial disclosure for an additional staff position that was associated with helping to process travel expenses for the associations. And at that time, my predecessor in this role, Mr. Strahl, had expressed some reservations about that because obviously international travel was grounded at the time. And I'm wondering, given that that's obviously continued to persist and probably will for some time to come, if that position, if the hiring for that position has gone ahead, or if that was delayed because there actually hasn't been a need for travel and will be delayed until such time.
Mr. Leblanc, please.
Yes, we did staff that position because there's a fair amount of preparatory work that was required in order to have us set up to properly disclose. So all kinds of systems testing processes to develop templates of reports, to have validated training to be given to various staff members. And so that resource that was hired has been occupied in doing that, even though there haven't been activities ongoing at the time.
I guess related to that, is the funding envelope for the Interparliamentary Associations approved as part of the annual budgeting process? This is just something I'm not sure. Is that is? Okay. And I think that occurs here, would it be our next meeting for 2021? And so this will be part of the discussions at that meeting? Is that okay? Last thing I just wanted to touch on, we obviously later in our agenda have an item regarding Ms. Ratanzi, and I understand she's been the president of the Canadian branch of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association. Is she still the president of that, or what's the situation there?
She is still the president of the Canadian branch of the CPA, yes.
Okay.
I just want to remind the honourable members that when something is in camera, we don't normally refer to it. We can refer to the person.
Sorry, pardon me.
Unrelated to the agenda. Just a
yes,
quick point. Nothing major, but please, Mr. Richards, continue.
No, that's all I had.
That's all?
Thanks.
Monsieur Deltel.
Mr. Deltel. Perfect. That's all. We shall proceed.
Is the committee annual report. At tab 6, you have before you a letter from the chair of the liaison committee, Ms. Groh, who wishes to inform the board that the liaison committee recently adopted and presented to the House its latest annual report on committee activity and expenditures for the 2019-2020 fiscal year. Ms. Groh submitted a copy of the report to the board and as well indicated that she would be available to meet at future date if the board so desires. Conformément à l'article
In accordance with 121.4 of the Rules and Regulations, the Bureau of the Internal Economy is supposed to submit a detailed annual report on commitments or expenses of each committee. Since 2014, according to established practice, annual reports of the liaison committees are approved by the Bureau and tabled by the chair to respect the requirements of the rules. As a result, if all members agree, I will be submitting the attached report to the House as a Bureau report in accordance with the rules. Do you have any questions or observations concerning the reports or the process? Do you agree that I present the entire report to the House? Do you agree with that? No questions? Very well. We shall now proceed. We shall now move into our in-camera session. We'll take a few minutes.
Activities, I do have a couple of quick questions.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Please do.
Sorry, I didn't realize you were moving on quite as quickly as you were. Just in regards to the reporting, a decade or two ago, the report for this, I understand, we used to just see reports that were 10 pages long, apparently. Now, I think it's a 139-page report. Now, obviously not one to necessarily criticize more accountability by any means, but I'm just curious, obviously that's a lot of work that goes into creating those reports. And if we have any stats on the readership of those reports.
Mr. Jantz, you have an answer, or you're responding to this?
Yes, I'm responding, but I'm not quite sure I have an answer, Mr. Richards, in terms of the readership. You're absolutely right, though, that the report has evolved considerably over the last few years. It used to be just done once a year. Now there are 2 other reports done mid-year, and indeed the content of the report is considerably beefed up compared to the past. A lot more information, statistics, etc. included. I can try to see with perhaps our IT folks in terms of how many hits these reports receive on the parliamentary website, because of course we stopped years ago from producing any paper copies, so it's hard to tell how many are actually distributed, but we can look into your question.
Sure, that would be appreciated. It would be good to know kind of what I understand that things are mostly on the web now, and so to get some, I'm sure that stats should be easy to come by as a result of that with web readership. One other thing, just quickly. I just wondered if we have any insight into the current year and how expenses are shaping up there. Obviously, a lot of things should have brought those expenses down, I would suspect, this year. First of all, during the first wave of the pandemic, the Liberal government essentially barred most of the committees from meeting. Then we had Parliament was prorogued for a time. And now, while the committees are meeting, first of all, they were in sort of a reduced. Now that we're at sort of close or near full capacity, they're still all meeting practically by video conference, and I guess we expect that to continue for some time to come. Just wondering what kind of, if we have any analysis at this point of what kind of an impact that's had on spending.
No, it's an excellent question, Mr. Richards. Indeed, committees have been, certainly the last little bit, quite active. A good number of meetings, lots of witnesses being heard. But further to the motion that was adopted in the House, all witnesses are being heard virtually. So that obviously then has an impact on witness expenses. We're not reimbursing witnesses to fly them into Ottawa. And the bulk of committee expenses are, of course, when the committees themselves travel, either within Canada or abroad. And of course, no committee travel has taken place since April 1st. So the costs are very, very minimal. Some reimbursement of some witness expenses. We, for instance, send out headsets to all witnesses to facilitate their participation, to make things easier for the interpreters, but very, very, very minimal expenses to date.
Okay, thank you.
Monsieur Deltel.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you so much to the witness. Let me pick up on that topic. You have said nearly no expenses. If we count the number of headsets sent out, well, perhaps not that expensive overall. So it's certainly not a considerable expense. Do you have a comparison to a, let's say, regular year after an election for committee expenses compared to those of this year? Secondly, could we have a figure that would help us understand how much we have saved, or let's say not yet spent, not exactly saved, but that we has not yet been spent, and get some idea of what we could do with that money? These are excellent questions, Mr. Deltel. The envelope for all committees is $4 million. In a, let's say, normal year, we spend $2.5 million, more or less. Last year, which was an election year, as well as much affected by the beginning of the COVID pandemic, as the report before you shows, only $700 million was spent. However, Internal Economy did adopt a motion last year to the effect that 1.5 million of the foreseen excess for that financial year would be used to fund setting up a web broadcasting system for parliamentary committees, and that was carried out. Was carried through on. That's why the 1.5 million comes out of that 4 million. But otherwise, only 700 million for general committee business. This year, as I have mentioned to Mr. Richards, we haven't spent that much. Not at all. We could give you a more precise figure, but unless things change radically and suddenly, and committees are in a position to return to normal style of functioning, we are likely to wind up with a considerable surplus on committees' budgets on the 31st of March. Mr. Deltel, back to you. All right, 24 committees, though, and you're telling us that year in, year out, they have 4 million to spend, and this year we're at 2.5 million. I'm just calculating this rapidly, so we've got about $60 million. You say we've spent 700 million and 1.5 million for as you said. So is it right to conclude that we haven't spent, okay, 1.75, all right, $57 million is still in the coffer because of the pandemic? Well, for last financial year, I think it was mostly due to the fact that it was an election year. The pandemic only hit us in mid-March. And of course, the year ended on the 31st of March. This year, committees are not traveling due to the pandemic, so they are not spending as much. 57.8 million, if we use these figures, haven't been spent. You're telling us that usually committees spend about 2.5 million to 24 committees. So 60 million are spent by the committees, all 24 of them. Mr. Patrice, do you have an answer for that? No, the total envelope, that's the budget for all 24 committees. That's 4 million. Ah, I see. Okay, that's what I thought. I thought that we were kind of skyrocketing out of that range. We will continue with Madame Bellefeuille. Yes, thank you, Chair. I was listening to Mr. Richards tell us that committees are virtual. Well, actually, their format is hybrid. This was a very important request made by MPs, and it's good to ensure that the public understands that MPs can go in person to committee rooms in order to contribute in person. And these rooms have been set up carefully for this purpose. Otherwise, they can join by video. I just didn't want the public to think that we are working solely via video conferencing. More and more MPs do prefer to come in person when they can, respecting all health rules, of course. I just wanted to make that clear. But what strikes me in what you have said is your mention of one of the expenses being sending out headphones to all witnesses. I don't want to challenge that statement. However, at the Bloc Québécois, we are often prejudiced because, we are stuck with a certain bias against us because our witnesses don't have the headsets. I would say 90% of witnesses do testify in English, such that witnesses need interpretation very often, and this has been clearly noted by the Bloc Québécois. We run into problems in this regard because witnesses don't have the right equipment. It's difficult, I understand, given that witnesses are often called at the last minute. Nevertheless, the problem is truly a very real one. Witnesses not having the right equipment to allow for appropriate interpretation. So I can assure you that Francophone MPs feel that there's a certain discrimination against them, a bias against them. Moreover, the witnesses are unable to follow along with the interpretation into their languages, and this makes it more difficult for MPs to ask questions and delve into the answers. I'm speaking of Bloc MPs, but there are, of course, Francophone MPs within the other parties as well. All this to say that the headphones are an IT expense, and this is a matter covered by Mr. Daubé. It's related to committee work. This is something I've just learned. But I just want to underscore the very real problem in this regard, and I certainly hope that in future all witnesses will receive proper headsets, the right equipment to allow them to work with the interpretation services and better testify. Very good comment, Madame de Bellefeuille. Indeed, committees are meeting in hybrid format. However, given the motion adopted in the House on the 23rd of September, all witnesses must testify virtually at a distance. And indeed, we do make our best efforts to send all witnesses who need them a set of headphones. But as you say, if a witness is called at the last minute, then that can make it difficult, despite procedures that have been set up to provide them with sufficient equipment, the right equipment. I think that 90% of witnesses do get them, but there are places in Canada we don't manage to get them to in time before the meeting. And so your comments are well noted, Madam. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Very well. Do I have agreement for presenting this report in the House? Good, thank you. So let us continue in camera and let us suspend for a few moments just to get up and stretch and to arrange for the in-camera meeting. Thank you.